Upon a Peak in Darien. First story. After Columbus had shown the way to America, a great many Spaniards came over. They came to Haiti and Cuba and Puerto Rico and the smaller islands near them. Like Columbus, they believed that these lands were near the eastern coast of Asia. They believed that they were a part of India, and therefore spoke of them as the Indies. Afterwards, when the mistake became known, these islands were named the West Indies, and the true islands of India were called the East Indies. Far to the southwest of Cuba, Columbus had discovered a long coast which he named Darien. It was the neck of land which we call the Isthmus of Panama, but he supposed that it was a part of the mainland of Asia. A few years later, some Spanish soldiers visited Darien and carried word back to Haiti that there was gold there. Now at that time, a Spaniard would go to the end of the world for gold, and therefore this news caused great excitement among the young men, who had come to cross the ocean for the purpose of adventure. To Darien, was the cry, and soon a company was formed and 2 ships were made ready to sail to that land of promise. The voyage was a delightful one from the start. The sea was calm, the wind was fair, and the vessels sped swiftly on their way. Soon the pleasant shores and green mountains of Haiti were lost to view. Only little rocky islets could be seen. The ship was heading straight into the Caribbean Sea. Then, what was the surprise of the crew of the larger ship to hear strange rappings in the hold. A voice was also heard, like that of someone calling for help. What could it mean? The sailors could not see anyone, and yet the sounds could not be mistaken. "Please, help me out!" The voice seemed to come from among some barrels in which the provisions were stored. "A man is in one of the barrels," said the captain. Soon the barrel was found and opened. Out of it leaped a young man, richly clad in velvet cloak and a silk doublet embroidered with gold. He was a handsome fellow. His eyes were keen and bright, and his face had a determined look, like that of one who's used to having his own way about things. At his side hung a long sword, and in his belt was a dagger. Several of the men knew him, and so he did not need to say that his name was Vasco Núñez de Balboa. They knew that he was a dashing adventurer, always doing and daring, and always borrowing and spending money. But why was he in the barrel? "The truth of the matter is this," he said. "I'm in debt to nearly everybody in Haiti. The officers were looking for me and would have taken me to prison, so I persuaded one of my friends to put me in a barrel and send me on board with the salt beef. And now here I am, bound with the rest of you for the rich coast of Darien." The captain was very angry. He threatened to put Balboa ashore on one of the rocky islets. "Shame, shame!" cried the rest of the party. "Let him go with us. He will be a great help." And so the captain grew kinder and agreed to take him. Balboa's manners were so pleasant, and he proved to be so able and brave, that soon nearly all on the ship looked up to him as their leader. When they reached Darien and began to seek for a good place to settle, Balboa gave them much help. He had been on the coast before, and he guided them to a safe harbour. The captain proved to be so overbearing that the men at last refused to obey him. They chose Balboa to be their commander, and the captain was glad to go back to Haiti in one of the ships. Balboa made a treaty with a powerful Indian chief who lived in a grand house and ruled all the country around. He married the chief's daughter, and at the feast he gave the Spaniards a great quantity of gold, and many slaves. The Indians did not much care for gold. They did not know that it was worth anything. When they saw the Spaniards moulding it into bars and quarrelling over it, they were astonished. "If you think so much of that yellow stuff," they said, "why don't you go where there is plenty of it?" And then they told Balboa that far to the south, on the other side of the mountains, there was a great sea, and on the shores of the sea there lived a people who had so much gold that they used it to make cups and bowls, and even pans and kettles. Balboa made up his mind to go at once in search of that sea. With 200 men and a packet of bloodhounds to chase unfriendly Indians, he set off towards the mountains. The distance was not great, but the country was very rough, the forest was almost impassable, and the party had to move slowly. After many days they came to the highest ridge of the mountains. Balboa climbed to the top of the loftiest peak and looked around. South and west of him he beheld a great sea. It was so near that it seemed almost at his feet, and it stretched away and away into the distance until it seemed to meet the blue sky. No white man had ever beheld that sea before. None had even so much as heard of it. The Spaniards afterwards called it the South Sea, because in going to it across the isthmus it seemed to lie south of the land. But we know it as the largest of all the oceans, the mighty Pacific. From that peak in Darien, Balboa looked down with mingled feelings of awe and exultation. With eagle eyes he stared at the Pacific, and all his men looked at each other with a wild surmise, silent, upon a peak in Darien. Balboa had no idea that he discovered an ocean. He supposed that the great water was merely a gulf or bay washing the coast, perhaps of India, perhaps of China. He hastened to go down to the shore. He stood on the beach, and as the waves broke about his feet, he raised his sword in the air and declared that he took possession of the new-found sea in the name of the King of Spain. Balboa with his men soon returned to the other side of the isthmus. He sent word to Spain of the discovery he had made. But ships and men and a new governor were already on their way to Darien, for word had reached the king that plenty of gold was to be had there. The new governor was an old man, as fierce and heartless as a tiger. No sooner had he arrived in Darien than he began to oppress and kill the Indians. Thousands of them perished through his cruelty. Balboa was grieved to the heart. He felt pity for the poor savages. By the first homeward-bound ship, he secretly sent complaints to the king about the governor's doings. Then he set to work getting ready to explore the South Sea. 4 more ships were taken apart at Darien, and Balboa caused the pieces to be carried over the mountains. At the shore on the farther side, these pieces were again put together, and the ships were launched upon the sea. They were the first European vessels that ever floated on the Pacific. But they were not yet ready to sail. They still needed a few bolts to strengthen them and some pitch to stop the leaks. While Balboa was waiting for these things, the governor sent for him. The old tiger had heard of the complaints and had been sent to the king. Balboa was ready to obey orders. He recrossed the mountains and was met by the officers who had been sent to arrest him. "You have plotted against me, you have tried to turn the king against me," said the savage governor. "You shall die the death of a traitor." Before the sun went down, the brave, dashing, handsome Balboa was dead.